Give me a minute and let's talk about questions coming in about the Russian freedom fighters' incursion into Russia and what is, in my mind, day 8 of the Russian Civil War. It's begun. The troops are on the move, they're taking territory, they're establishing positions, and they're moving ahead. Civilians are fleeing to get out of the line of fire. And more importantly, so is the Russian regular army. Where are they? Why are they not defending Mother Russia? That is a good question, boy. And in response to Anthony Tommy Tom's question here, are others joining in? Well, we don't really know. There's no way that the Freedom of Russia Legion, the Siberian Battalion, and the Russian Volunteer Corps could be doing this on their own. No way. They don't have the resources. So how are they making these tremendous gains? How are they doing this at all? How are they surviving? Well, they have gotten a little help. They've been reinforced by the Ishkarians, the rebel Chechen brigade that's been fighting with the Ukrainians against the Russians and had been fighting for Russian freedom all the way back to the 2 Chechen wars. They just weren't on the side of the traitor Kadyrov when the current Kadyrov's father betrayed the movement to Russia. And that was the end of that, right? That was the only way the Russians would have won the Second Chechen War, is through the betrayal of one of their own. And so those who remain loyal to the idea of a free Chechnya, they are still out there and they're still fighting the Ishkarian brigade. And they've joined the fight now. But where are the regular Russians? Where's the Russian regular army here? Now, if you guys remember when Eugene had his mutiny, he just walked into Rostov-on-Don and took it, didn't fire a shot. He marched to Moscow, and it wasn't until on the way to Moscow that people started shooting back at him. The people that are there to defend the Kremlin, the last line of defense, right? Is it possible, Anthony, that some of the Russian regulars are turning a blind eye to this incursion? They're not going to engage their fellow Russians. Hey, if they can make it to Moscow and take out the guy, maybe it'd be okay. I don't know. I don't know. Now, there was another good question that came in from Nitarsk that I thought was worth addressing since we're looking at questions about the Belgorod incursion. He says, or he wants to know, isn't this evidence to support the Putin narrative that they're fighting NATO? I mean, look, there's no doubt that NATO is supplying weapons to the Ukrainians and through the Ukrainians to the Russian Freedom Legions. I don't think. I mean, the officials in charge of that might have plausible deniability on it, but I think the reality is that that's what's going on. And I think we all mostly know that. So to say that you're fighting NATO because you're fighting NATO weapons, no. You're fighting your fellow Russians. These guys are Russian. I don't care what Vlad Vexler says. And I like Vlad, don't get me wrong. Guy's insightful, he knows a lot. But to say that these guys aren't Russian, we know who the leadership of these groups are. We've seen the interviews with the soldiers in the trenches. These guys are Russians and Chechens and Yakutis and people of Sakha. That's who they are. To deny them their identity is to be no better than the Russian establishment that denies the Ukrainians their separate identity. Their messaging may be done by the Ukrainians, their armaments may come from the Ukrainians, but they are Russians, hell-bent on securing the freedom of Russia from the dictator. So does it help the Putin narrative? I don't think much is going to help the Putin narrative at this point. And in terms of it backfiring or there being a consequence, come on. The Russia's done. The Army, the Navy, the Air Force are being eviscerated every day. The stockpiles of weapons are being degraded at an unprecedented rate in human history. We've never seen a country demilitarize itself at this rate because of its own incompetence, to be clear. So Russia's got nothing left but the nukes. And if the nukes are in the same kind of working condition as everything else that they've been having to maintain, I don't have any worries about that at all. And I don't think you should either. Because the Russians know that we have nukes too. And they know, more importantly, that ours work. They'll get where we send them. They try to fire any of their shit, they're as likely to irradiate Moscow or Minsk as they are to hit Minneapolis. Give me a break. Consequences. The only consequences there are to defeating Russia is a world where more people have greater freedom and the rule of law is extended to 140 million people that have been kept in slavery. And the hundreds of millions of people that live around them can now live without fear that the Russian bear is coming to devour them. That's the consequence of defeating Russia, and it must be defeated. Thanks, guys.